Question? We can't hear you, friend. You're not muted either.
Yeah, I don't have a question at this point. Thank you.
Okay.
I just joined Bruce a little bit late. We'll talk about that later, but good to be here. Thank you.
All right. Okay.
I'm glad I'm not the only one with technical issues.
Most definitely not.
While we're waiting for realtors that are on here, I've been asked to speak to a very large Rotary group. I'm going to try to put it off till a little while later, but this is such a fascinating part of the presentation that I can give. So I just think that there's so much value in being able to learn how to present, kind of present the portion that we just went through, where you don't get into the nitty gritty details, but you're just casting the vision. And I can definitely see the relationships and the benefits of being able to do that.
For sure, Catherine. We'll talk about that more later. That's one of the things I strategize with my custom campaign folks.
Cami, are you seeing section 3 up on the screen?
No, you're not sharing screen.
I'm not sharing screen.
I've got you pinned though, so we see your face nice and big on the screen.
Okay, is that it? There we go.
Yep, you're up.
Section 3? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So section 3 is the details, documents, do's, don'ts, how to become knowledgeable, etc. And we want to talk about what properties qualify. Cami, do you want to do this?
Yes, please. I will do this part. So let's get into what properties qualify, because that's another question that you have. And we're going to give you some examples here just to get your wheels turning in your brain. But just know that in essence, any property that is not a timeshare has equity and is marketable. But let's get a little bit more detail. So it can be residential, primary, secondary, investment homes, really anything. Commercial, the case studies that we share are to give you specific ideas and specific clients and specific amounts of money that went to specific nonprofits, but truly multifamilies, office buildings, strip malls, restaurants, any kind of commercial building qualifies. Land, raw land, farmland, commercial, residential land. Now we're going to talk about that it needs to be marketable, meaning if it's out in the middle of nowhere and there's no road to it, it's probably not marketable. And if they can't sell it and can't give it away because it's contaminated with the big oil spill, well, we don't want it either. But ultimately, any real estate. So once again, no timeshares. There's a few things that you're going to want to find out. The length of ownership. We have a form that we're going to show you here in a minute. Just a one-page, really simple form. It's got maybe 10 questions on it. They need to have owned the property for at least a year. And that's because of the tax implications, et cetera. The type of ownership is something that we'll ask about. Now, marketability, let me stop on this for just a moment. For example, if a property appraises at $1 million and it's been on the market for 3 years at $1 million and it hasn't sold because really it needs to be $800,000 and it needs a new roof. Well, when they donate it and we do list it at $800,000 and put a roof on it because they're still getting the $1 million appraisal as the write-off. In other words, We just took that property that was not marketable at $1 million that needed a roof. Now, because of different circumstances, it is marketable. So people tend to want to talk about looking for properties that people want to get rid of or get out of or can't give away. We want property that's marketable because we want it to go under contract in the next 30 to 60 days too. We want to find out what are the underlying tax circumstances. The minimum equity of 250 here, we're going to be talking about a case study shortly that actually ended up with a $43,000 check instead of 250,000 or more. So there's always exceptions to every rule, but as a rule of thumb, 250,000 in equity means that's how much is going to go to the nonprofit world, and that's what we're really looking for. Average equity, as you will see us post and say all the time, average amount of a donation of real estate is $550,000. And those are numbers that you can find online, even at aefonline.org. I'll put it in the comments in a minute. But that's the American Endowment Foundation, who's also a client of Realty Gift Fund. And that's what they state on their website is the average amount is 550. Maximum size is unlimited. So, you know, if someone has a $10 million strip mall and they have an $8 million mortgage and they need a $500,000 parking lot, well, we can handle something like that because there's plenty of equity there at the end of the day when that property gets sold. Now, when this form gets filled out that we'll share with you, a Realty Gift Fund is going to actually take a look at the property and let you know if this property qualifies based on the seller's intention. You know, what are their tax circumstances? We're going to show you in just a moment net sheets of what it looks like to sell the property outright, to make a donation, to do something in the middle with the bargain sale where they're getting a little bit of cash out. Those are things that please do not get overwhelmed by this. It can be really confusing. And we've already had a couple of questions about how much do we need to know? How much do we need to tell the board? We're just giving you a bigger picture of why typically nonprofits don't take real estate, because there's a lot of things at play here. But at the end of the day, Realty Gift Fund does all of this boring number stuff for us. So as we get into the documents that are required, Bruce is going to take this over. We just want you to know the qualifications for the property: no timeshare, needs to have equity, and it needs to be marketable. Bruce?
Let me back up 1 second too about this business of $250,000 of minimum equity. Realty Gift Fund does not charge a fee for the work that it does. That's because we are the 501c3 that is actually taking the gift. The gift is being technically made to Realty Gift Fund. And when we are done and we have spent our money fixing up a property and we sell the property, the first thing that we do is pay ourselves back, and you will see what the math looks like in an example we're going to give you. And whatever is left over is what's intended for the charitable funds to the nonprofit world. We don't charge a fee. We simply retain a piece of the net proceeds that are left when it's all over. Cammie has told you that we're in the business of trying to grant out between 90 and 95% of what is left over. We do have a minimum of $20,000 per deal. So by having a minimum equity at the end of the day of $250,000, our $20,000 is less than 10% of what is left, and we are granting out more than 90%. We will do deals that are smaller, but if we keep 20% of what's left on the table, we are in fact getting more than 10% of what is left. And that's why we're really hoping that the minimum equity of any deal is 250. Will we look at something smaller? You know, on a case-by-case basis, we will, okay? So what are the documents that are required? The very first thing that we usually produce when we've had our first phone call with a donor is to create a net gift estimate. This is saying to the donor, and we'll go through it in more detail, based on what you have said to us, that you think it's worth this amount, that you think the debt is this amount, that you think the repairs might be this amount. We will go through that a worksheet that says spending that kind of money on your property and then paying the closing costs of both the donation and the sale. We believe we are going to be left with this at the end. It is a document we create immediately after the first conversation with the donor so that the donor understands how the deal works. Then that usually results when there's an agreement in either a donation agreement, which is an outright gift, no debt, no cash being paid to the donor, or a bargain sale agreement, which means that there is some cash being paid to the donor. And then we always have the donor sign a disclosure agreement, which is mostly around the fact that they need to get an appraisal and that the appraisal needs to be a real appraisal. We do not get into fraudulent relationships with our donors and our appraisers to try to defraud the IRS. We're not interested in that at all. At the end of a gift cycle, once we have taken a donation, we create a form called 8283. It's an IRS form. It is filled out by the appraiser, by the donor, and by the nonprofit. We each have our section that we have to sign, which then gets attached to the donor's tax return, which qualifies the donor for a tax deduction. This is usually handled between us and the donor's tax preparer. If we sell the property within 3 years, we are obligated to send to the IRS a form 8282 that says, this is what we sold the property for. It's only signed by us. When it comes to listing agreements and purchase and sale agreements, we use your agreements. Whatever your brokerage company puts it forth as a listing agreement or as a purchase and sale agreement, and all of the disclosures that you are required to have your clients sign, we use your agreements. Our donation agreement and our bargain sale agreement are documents that we have created for our donors, but the listing agreement and the purchase and sale agreements are your documents. We sign your documents.
I'm taking a class on the computer and we're on a break.
Guys, if you could mute yourselves out, please.
So let's take a look at these documents, and the first thing we're going to do is show you what a net gift estimate looks like. Okay, we've had our first conversation with the donor, who has said to us, "I have a property. I think it's worth $1.2 million. I have debt on the property. I think it's about $300,000. Would you please take this gift?" And we will say yes. And if we do, the gift portion is $900,000. That portion of the gift, of the transfer, passes from the donor to us free of any capital gains tax that might have been obligated by the donor if the donor had sold the property for cash, and the donor, based on the appraisal of $1.2 million, and are having to write a check for $300,000, gets a tax deduction for the difference, which is $900,000. So at this stage in the game, what we're saying to the donor is Realty Gift Fund is into this thing for $300,000 of our cash. We have to close through a title company or an attorney, the donation, the transfer of the deed from the donor to us, and that comes with some kinds of closing costs. We do perform due diligence on the property to make sure that it is what the donor said it was. Once we take title, we do have holding costs, typically utilities and maintenance and security and insurance and what have you. And we may have to make repairs to the property. And in this example, we are saying upfront to the donor, we feel that we're going to be into this for $305,000 upon accepting the gift from you. Now we're going to sell the property. And if it sells for $1.2 million, the first thing that happens is we get repaid our $305,000. Now we have you as our broker to whom we are paying a commission and other closing costs. And in this example, $79,000, which leaves $816,000 on the table to be shared with the nonprofit world. You'll notice that the first step was created the charitable gift for $900,000. The second step creates the charitable funds that gets shared with the nonprofit world. In this example, we've kept 5% for Realty Gift Fund, and we have granted out to the nonprofit the donor has selected, or it might be nonprofits, multiple nonprofits, $775,000. This is what a net gift estimate looks like. We actually update this worksheet throughout the whole course of taking the gift and selling the property so that we can keep track of the actual results when we're all done. Maybe the appraisal says $1,250,000. Maybe the debt wasn't 300, but with 310. Maybe the commissions weren't $2,500 to take the gift, but $2,000. We adjust all of these numbers along the way so that at the end of the deal, when we are ready to wire money to the nonprofit world, we can produce a net gift estimate that shows every nickel that got spent everywhere and how much was left over to be shared. Okay? This is a really important document. Probably, well, in some people's minds, the most important document, because it is the path that shows everyone right up front where we're trying to go and where we actually went when we got done. The donation agreement is like a real estate agreement. It has a due diligence period. It has timeframes for the delivery of documents for our review. It has a closing date specified, et cetera, just like any other real estate agreement would have. But it also has in the recitals some things that speak about the charitable provisions of the transaction. First of all, expressing the donor's charitable intent. And secondly, expressing Realty Gift Fund's willingness to accept the gift based on the terms of the agreement. In the provision area of the document, we talk about closing costs. And here I want you to know that Realty Gift Fund absorbs all of the closing costs for the donor. The donor, who might normally have to pay a proration of property taxes if the property is sold in October, and if it were actually sold for cash, the donor would have to credit the buyer with 10 months of property tax payments so that when the new owner pays the property taxes the next year, they're only paying for their 2 months of ownership and the remaining months of the years in which they took ownership. We pay all that stuff. We pay every closing cost on behalf of the donor. The only cost the donor has is to pay for a qualified appraisal. And that is a provision in the document saying the donor must find the appraiser and pay for the appraisal because that is the basis of the donor's tax deduction. And we need an arm's length difference between them and us as to that. In the representation section of the document, we restate the donor's charitable intent. We specify that Realty Gift Fund will be reimbursed for any money it spends getting to the end of the deal. And then in the paragraph called the advised gift, we allow the donor to say by contract, here is where you will send the money when you are done. And we agree in that same provision, here's how much we are going to keep when we are done. So it is established up front. Here's what Realty Gift Fund is going to retain as its share. And here's where all the other money is going to go. And then, of course, we always say we want our donors to get independent tax advice to make sure that they're not relying on us as their tax advisor. A bargain sale agreement is the exact same agreement as the donation agreement, except it has a purchase price in there saying, if we need to write a check to the donor, here's what, and it's called the purchase price. We are buying the property for less than its appraised value, and here's how much we're paying to the donor. The disclosure that I referred to earlier is all about the appraisal, stating that the appraisal is required, stating that the appraisal will be attached to Form 8283, which is a required document of the deal. We are trying to protect against any fraud, and we are alerting the donor right up front. We will not tolerate it. If we suspect that there is any appraisal fraud, we will simply walk away from the deal. And we are notifying the donor that if we sell the property within 3 years, we have to submit to the IRS Form 8282 that says, here's what we sold the property for. I just wanted you to see, this is what a Form 8283 looks like, where the little turquoise arrows are. That's the second page of that document. The donor fills out where the property is identified in the first part, the taxpayer signs the second part, the appraiser signs the third part, we sign the fourth part. We provide this to the donor, attaches it to his tax return, and that's what qualifies the donor for the tax deduction. Here's a Form 8283, which says, here's the same property, here's what we sold it for, and we turn that into the IRS. Again, your paperwork for the listing agreement and the purchase and sale agreement and all of your other disclosures are signed by us. We're very willing to do that. We're brokers. We know these things are required. We know that your brokerage firm has a preferred document that they would like for their clients to sign. We become your client and we sign all of those documents. Now, when we have our first conversation with the donor, it is usually between you, the donor, us, and maybe even the nonprofit. This is where I want you to be absolutely assured that we're letting you off the hook. What we're asking you to do is use this in-depth knowledge to feel confident about the topic. But all we're asking you to do is get conversations between us and the donor, of which you're going to be a part, so that you learn along the way. And in this first conversation that we have with the donor, we are going to determine what the donor's unique goals are. And so our intake form has a top section that talks about the donor's goals. Okay, so let's use an example. Here's a donor who says, I have a property that I would like to make a donation, and it must close by December of this year because I need the tax deduction this year. Okay, we write that down. The donor says, I have a $220,000 mortgage on the property. We want to know that the donor needs for us to pay off that mortgage. The donor might say the property's in pretty good shape, but you know, if I had to sell the property, I would need to do these few things. Will you do that for us? The donor's goals is to talk us into spending our money doing this thing. And then we collect a little bit of information about the property, which of course includes the address and who's the owner and is it occupied and what do you think it's worth? What do you think the debt is worth? Is there any, if it's occupied, what do you think the income is or the expenses are? We're just gathering some basic information that allows us to create the net gift estimate. It also allows us to go out into the public domain and look up the property ourselves and say, yeah, well, he was almost right about what he was describing. It's really not that great of a neighborhood, or wow, that's a better place than I thought it was. We are really interested. That's the intention of this very brief intake form called the preliminary property evaluation. Okay, so that's a quick just review of the documents, Cami, and you know, maybe it generates some questions, which I'm happy to talk about. If the group would like to chat about that.
Awesome. What questions do we have, guys? We're getting some great interaction in the chat as well. Becky's really got her head around this. And Becky, just as a side note about that, just because you can explain it like that doesn't mean you should. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. We are going to talk more in a little bit about the 4 S's, which are story, 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 shut up, as Dr. Russell James came up with. And the reason for that is story gets the emotion, and we want to get people emotionally vested in why they want to hear about this. Questions?
Do you ever say no to a property? And why would you?
Well, Bruce, you're muted out. If it's, so back to the whole point about it being marketable, being the circumstances, I mean, he can talk about specific ones, but just to keep it a simple answer, if the donor's intentions are not honorable and they're really trying to get one over on the government, we're not interested. So it has to be something with enough meat on the bone, enough good intention, and that just makes sense. Just like some of us would not take certain listings. Other agents might take that listing, but we're not going to because we know
that's a really good point, Cami. All of you are experienced in having been offered a listing that you didn't take for one reason or another. I was offered a property a few days ago. The donor said, I bought this building site in this really fine subdivision. I mean, it is. I know the subdivision in New Mexico. He paid $99,000 for it, but the market has changed and he has it listed now for $45,000. And he said, would you be interested? Well, you know, it's way below the $250,000 equity thing that we talked about before. And I mentioned to him, look, if we do, we have a $20,000 minimum. So the amount that's available to go out to the nonprofit world after we pay closing costs will be about $20,000. There'll be about 40 grand left over. We're going to keep 20 and we're going to send out 20. So I had to get him to agree to that first. At the end of the conversation, you know, one of my favorite phrases is, what question should I have asked first? I don't know how many times I have said to myself, what question should I have asked first? It would have saved us a lot of time. Turns out this guy's got $22,000 worth of debt on the property, and he hasn't paid his HOA fees since he owned the property. He owes $20,000 in HOA fees $42,000 of encumbrances, nothing's going to be left over after selling it for 45 grand. We just, you know, obviously we said no. But I mean, and that may sound obvious to you, but when we say no, it's obvious to everybody why we do. 100 acres in the middle of nowhere, no infrastructure, no roads, no access, no mineral rights. You know, we're not interested in owning properties for 5-6 years and ultimately selling the property for $2,000 because we just need to get rid of it. We just say no right up front.
Hey, Bruce,
ahead.
I have a quick question. And just to say, I've been on this training multiple times and you can't get it all the first time. So I have a question. I'm sure I've seen it before, but this time it caught my eye. And when you had that note about if you sell the property prior to 3 years of holding it,
Yes.
you have that IRS form 8283 or whichever.
Right.
Do you hold many properties over 3 years, and why do you not have to report the?
We've held one property more than 3 years. We are not interested in deals that we have to hold that long. And Tamisa, thank you for asking that question. By the way, Tamisa is really experienced at doing what you all are going to be trying to do after this class is over. She has connected Cami and Realty Gift Fund to a lot of nonprofits in the Scottsdale market. I mean, she's really, really good at what she's doing. I think she feels pretty darn comfortable with what she's doing. And it simply took her making the first call, then the second call, and what have you, and she got her wind. And so I just want to congratulate you, Tamisa. You're one of our favorite partners here. But that's a great question. We almost never hold a property for 3 years. We're really not interested in that. We are in the business of creating funds for the nonprofit world. We have gone to our compliance team. By the way, Realty Gift Fund has a back office of about 8 or 9 people, attorneys, accountants, IRS compliance officers, what have you. And if there is a difference between the appraised value and the sale value, even if it's kind of appears to be a significant difference, 40% maybe, the IRS's view of that is that the donor, the owner of the property, gets an appraisal based on the owner's circumstances. And an appraisal usually says, if you go through a marketing period that is typical for the market, which might be if it's an empty office building or a 70% vacant shopping center, that marketing period may be 1.5 years. It may be a year. You may be required to put some money into it, blah, blah, blah. Your value is this. As soon as it is transferred to Realty Gift Fund, the circumstances are totally different. We are in the business of selling property, accepting property, selling it in a reasonable time frame for a reasonable amount of money to create money for the nonprofit world, and we are allowed to sell it for less. So we have no hesitation sending that 8282 in, and we have no belief that the donor's appraised value is going to be upset by the fact that we sold the property for less. It's never happened.
Okay, thank you.
Who else has a question?
Ingrid is asking what percentage is commercial versus residential for donations?
About 50-50. We've done shopping centers, office buildings, a partial interest in a resort, restaurants, land, and we've done primary homes, second homes, and investment homes. And so that last category is residential. The first category was commercial. It's been about 50-50 so far.
And let me just say that the properties that have come in to date have been whatever came. But now that we are doing cause marketing campaigns, which means marketing around a cause, you know, if you, for example, Ingrid, can you unmute yourself? I want to ask you, are you a real estate agent? What's your position in all this?
Yes, I'm a real estate agent.
Do you like residential or commercial?
I do predominantly residential.
Who are your ideal clients? Who do you want to list? Who do you want to do business with?
My lists tend to be downsizers, right sizers, kind of folks, sometimes upsizers. I mean, I'll do business with just about anybody, you know.
Welcome to the world.
Right. You know, if you want me to buy or help you buy or sell a house, yeah, I'm going to try to help you. So that also leads me to asking about like referrals for, like, my company does have a commercial division. So I would definitely have somebody that if I got, you know, their foot in the door, I could refer to,
Yes.
as well as other parts of the state that maybe I just don't do business in, like you're talking about vacation homes. Where I'm located in southeastern Pennsylvania, I have the Jersey Shore about an hour and a half one way, and then you go up and we have like mountains. I'm not licensed in Jersey, but again, I have connections there. So it sounds like I could help hook them up, you know, like work with people here in my neighborhood who have a second home down at the shore that maybe they want to sell, and still work in a way that, you know, as a realtor, I'm getting compensated for making those connections.
That is true. That is a true statement. So let me just say something about commissions and referrals, okay? I grew up in the real estate business, in the investment world, in the commercial world. At one point in time, not too long ago, I had to actually move to Colorado to take over a failing residential subdivision that was very large. And I had to stand up a residential sales office. And in 5 years of selling all that property and getting this developer out of trouble, I cut my teeth quite adequately on the residential side of things. But real estate, residential commissions and commercial commissions are often different.
Yeah.
If you're selling a $10 million property, you know, I know friends of mine who have taken 1 point to be the broker involved, or 2 points, or 3, or, you know, what have you, never 6 on a $10 million property. I don't know any residential broker who has said that they would do it for less than 6 unless they had both sides of the equation, or then they would take maybe 5 or something like that. I mean, it's different everywhere. Whatever it is in your market, for whatever kind of property that you are representing for us, whatever that commission is the commission that we will pay. We don't argue about it. If it's 6%, it's 6%. If it's 4%, it's 4%. If I've got to pay an extra half a point or an extra point to get something done to make everyone happy to do that. But we also expect the referral operation to function just like it normally does. So Ingrid, when you're, you know, if you refer us to a deal that's not in your market and you don't become our broker, we expect the referral fee to be paid by the person you referred the deal to. And if you're not happy with that and we've got to ramp it up by a half a point or whatever it is to make everybody happy, we will do that. Okay? I just wanted to say that.
Well, and the reason why I asked who do you want to do business with, I know that as a licensed agent, you can do business with anyone, but see, this gives us the opportunity to pick and choose and cherry pick. Who do I want to do business with? If I normally list properties that are 200,000, because that's just the people that I hang out with and the referrals I get, maybe I want to now list property that's 500,000 or $1 million, because now you have a different conversation. You have a different icebreaker, a different way to get your foot in the door. You can get into those higher priced neighborhoods because those are the people, typically people who make donations of any kind are higher education, they're higher income, and they're just more philanthropic. So, you know, when I know who you want to do business with and what you're passionate about, You can ask Tamisa or Tisha or Laurie Knudsen, who's not on here today, but she's doing the Minnesota Mission Possible campaign. And it's all about not just saying, well, if it's 50-50 commercial real estate, that's what I have to do. No, it's like whatever you want to do. Who do you want to do business with? That's who we get you in front of. Just looking at some of these questions over here. Becky says, she's asking a question about if the property actually sells for more than appraisal, does it change their deduction with the IRS?
Good question. Smart question. The amount of the tax deduction is limited up to the amount of the appraisal. So if you get an appraisal for $2 million and the property sells for 2.2, your tax deduction is $2 million. You don't have to, if the property appraises for $2 million and it sells for 1.6, and your financial advisor is nervous about the difference between those two numbers, you don't have to claim $2 million. You can claim up to $2 million. You know, every donor is different when it comes to this. The one saving grace about the property that sells for 2.2 is you can go out and get another appraisal. The appraisal has to be dated no earlier than 60 days prior to the donation to us, but it can be dated later than we sell the property up to the point of the day the donor files his tax return. So if the donation is made today, the appraisal can actually be done next April 12th. I don't know why anyone would do that, but they could. And the point I'm getting at is if the property sells for 2.2, you could just go back to the appraiser and say, hey, buddy, you got it wrong. I want you to redo it. And if he says, no, I'm not going to redo it, you can go out and get another appraisal. It might be worth your while to pay for a second appraisal.
All right, Mary Jane has a promotional question. Pick me. What's your question?
Hi, everyone. I am a member of the general public, just taken in by this idea. I met Cammie through a different group. I'm a very heart-centered person and was part of a metaphysical community for 15 years in Atlanta, spiritual living centers, and there's so many realtors in it. And I was so excited that while we've been on the call, I called Covenant House. And I looked on their website. I said, they don't take real estate. And I did that right before I heard all the cons of people who've been burned. So I'm going to listen with different ears. So I'm confident that we're going to come to the place where someone like me just would tell anyone, like if I was sitting and a conversation happened with somebody with drinks in New York, I don't know them, I would just give the two-liner of whatever to connect them to Cammie and to Bruce. And that sounds wonderful. So I want to follow up with Covenant House, and I'm wondering, do these conversations happen on email? Do I tell them to go straight to the RAOC? Like if someone says, I'd like to learn more, I just want to pass them right along. And this is not a question, but I'm here in the class because Cammie inspired me to think about my nonprofit. Instead, I'm just starting my own personal business right now. Again, I'm going to push my nonprofit building up to the top of the list. So that's why I came into the class. But I'm thinking, like, what does a Jane Doe like me? How can we really help the cause?
Well, there's a few things, Mary. Do you go by Mary Jane or MJ?
Either one, Mary Jane or MJ. MJ's great.
So it depends. One of the things we talk about in the group training and then in the cause marketing campaigns, I talk about the 7 P's from purpose to payoff. And to keep it really brief, the first P is your purpose. Like, what does inspire? Why would you even want to talk to them about it? And we won't get into all the details of this, but why would you talk to them about it? And the second P is their purpose, meaning who are you talking to? Are you talking to a nonprofit? Are you talking to a property donor? Are you talking to a real estate agent? So it depends on why you're having the conversation and what would be important to them as to what story you would tell to pique their interest. And you and I can talk a little bit more offline about, how could you leverage this to build your business, even as a coach or a mentor, so what kind of business are you building? You're muted.
Theatrical, building bridges to healing.
So who's your client? Who's going to pay you money?
Can we not talk about that with the group? Sorry.
Okay. Well, the reason why I ask is because if I know who you want to do business with and what you're passionate about, I could help you put together a campaign to get in front of hundreds or thousands of them. So to answer your question with Covenant House, if that's a cold market, sounds like somebody you just randomly found. First of all,
No, it's not. No, it's not at all.
Oh, it's somebody that you know.
Covenant House is the largest nonprofit youth center in the nation, and I'm here in New York, and one of their headquarters is right down there by the Hudson River. And I'm from Villanova, and the president, Kevin Ryan of Covenant House, came and spoke at Villanova. I heard him.
They're really big in Philadelphia too. They were on my list of nonprofits to talk to as well. So yeah.
Well, Ingrid should contact Kevin Ryan, not me. You should contact them.
So who do you know there, MJ?
I literally just called them. I homed a Covenant House person. I mean, I know I'm a little too enthusiastic, so that's why we want to get Mary Jane straight so she's not making mistakes with this great group.
Well,
MJ, let me just say this. You obviously have the nerve that it takes to make a cold call, okay? You've got a website address for Cammie's group, Real Agents of Change. RealtyGiftFund.org is Realty Gift Fund. If you inspired them to just say, you know what, I need you to do 2 things in the next 30 minutes. Go to those 2 websites. Don't make, then we're going to have a little discussion. And it can be a 5-minute discussion. You need to get on the phone with these people and just hear what's going on in the nonprofit world around gifts of real estate. That's really all you got to say. And then, we can all together go down the path together and, take the next step.
Well, and we're going to keep talking about the 4 S's and telling the story. So once again, Covenant House, hey, I just sat in on a Zoom where I heard about nonprofits that are nonprofits just like yours. They're getting checks in the 6 figures without a fundraiser. You need to know about this. So that's a story. If we start saying, hey, I learned about charitable real estate, and don't worry, you don't take title because they pay it off and they'll partner with you, and they're not going to even, now we're selling them something and they don't want to be sold. So it's about a story to keep it really simple and straight. Okay, it is 1:56. Let's take a quick 5-minute break. We have another case study to get to. Do we want to do that before or after the break, Bruce? What would you like to do?
Let's do it right now, because Ingrid inspired me. Now that I know where she lives, I want to tell the story about National Jewish Health. Because I think, do you know where Lake Harmony is, Ingrid? Yeah? Okay, good. So, National Jewish Health, the largest respiratory hospital in America, has 1 hospital, Denver, Colorado, has 20 or so fundraisers who live around the country raising money for National Jewish Health. One of them lives in Washington, D.C. And she is in each one of these 20 fundraisers is in charge of a book of donors. And I think commonly in the nonprofit world, when you're a fundraiser with a book of donors you're responsible for, that's somewhere between 150 and 250 donors. So this woman was in charge of her book of donors. There was a woman in Maryland who had made a gift to National Jewish Health 32 years in a row, 32 straight checks, $25 each year, 32 years. The one thing that they knew about this woman, this donor, was that she was loyal to them. They suspected she had like zero capacity. But you hang on to people like this because you never know what's going to happen at the end of their life. They might bequeath something to you. You just never know. And the relationship between this fundraiser and this donor was such that they just connected with each other. This woman in Maryland bought a ski cabin in Lake Harmony, Pennsylvania, 30 years ago. She did it for her parents, who lived in that ski cabin for 25 years. And then they both passed away. And then the woman leased the cabin to a couple who lived there for 3 years, and then they moved on. And now the owner of the ski cabin is faced with, what do I do next? She lived 4 hours away. It needed work after 30 years of use, right? And she said to herself, I have no interest in doing that work, hiring a broker, putting up with that process, blah, blah, blah. She called National Jewish Health. She called the fundraiser and said, would you accept my ski cabin? And the fundraiser, I want you all to hear this. This is what the fundraiser said. Thank you for your very generous offer. Let me get my real estate team on the phone. That's the only thing this fundraiser knew about real estate, was to say, thank you for the very generous offer. Let me get my real estate team on the phone. The next day, it was a 3-way call that included me. We talked about this ski cabin. We talked about the woman's devotion to National Jewish Health over 32 years, blah, blah, blah. I called over to Lake Harmony. It took more than a day, maybe a day and a half, to come up with a real estate broker I felt comfortable with. And we got underway and found out that indeed the cabin needed work. It was 900 square feet. It was appraised at $70,000. Here's an example of something that we will do in order to create a relationship with someone like National Jewish Health, which is why we took the deal. It did need $13,000. I had to, the broker went in and said, my God, the kitchen's a mess. The walls have holes in them. The roof is leaking, the front porch, blah, blah, blah. She helped me develop a team of painters and electricians and carpenters and what have you. We went out and got bids. And we got comfortable with what was going on. So we accepted the donation. We closed on the donation probably in like the end of October. Within 2 weeks, we had our bids lined up. We were ready to start work the following Monday, and an offer came in. Stop, don't do anything. I will pay $70,000. Give me a credit for the amount of your bid, $13,000. I'll do the work myself. We sold the unit to the woman 2 weeks later. We wrote a check to National Jewish Health, $42,000, from a woman who had been giving them $25 a year for 32 years. And to me, you know, even when I tell the story, this is the 500th time I've told the story, it still, you know, makes me emotional that something like that would actually happen. So it's a short story, but it's a great story to remember. that gifts can come from out of nowhere, from people who you don't think have capacity to give a charitable gift of real estate. This woman was not wealthy. She was not a high net worth client, but she did create $42,000 for National Jewish Health. They were super happy to get that check.
And I've been sharing that story a lot too, from the perspective that been playing with the campaign, Save a Nonprofit, Help a Donor. Save a nonprofit, help a donor. That gets your attention, makes you wonder what's going to be said. And the fact is, you did help that donor. That donor that loved that organization enough to scrape up $25 a year for 25 years, when she was able to give that check for $43,000, she's the one that got emotional. She's the one that was celebrated and acknowledged and became the hero and could finally leave the legacy she wanted to leave. We are helping the donors, not just with tax consequence, but with legacy and the power of being able to help the way that they want to. Save a nonprofit, help a donor.
Just so you know, she literally became the poster child for National Jewish Health. She is not the biggest donor they ever had.
Yeah.
They've taken donations of over $1 million from single donors, but this woman became literally, she was on the postcard and in the letter, her photo. They sent out a postcard to 87,000 donors at National Jewish Health saying, look at what this woman did. Her name's Linda Durham. I mean, she's famous in the annals of National Jewish Health because of what she was able to do, the capacity she was able to find. And guess what? She said, if you'll take this gift, just take it, I will give you the whole damn thing. No mortgage, no cash payment, just give you the whole darn thing.
Now that was BC. That was before Cammie.
That was before Cammie.
If Cammie had been a part of it, the whole nation would have known her in the interviews and the media coverage. But that's what we're going to do with you guys. Of course, keeping people's privacy private if that's the way they want to be.
Right.
But when
right.
your nonprofit, your nonprofit doesn't even need to know the address. That's how far removed they are from the transaction. However, if they help you promote the address and let their followers know, hey, when 123 Main Street sells, we're getting a check for $43,000. When they're smart enough to get in and help promote that, that's big for everybody involved. So unless there's a burning question, it's 2:05. We've got one more really big segment to get through. Was that section 3 or 4?
I think that was 3. I think that was 3.
Okay, we've got 2 more segments. We got to roll. So let's take a very quick break. Let's make it a 3-minute break. We can go potty that fast, and come right back at 2:08, and let's get some more good stuff going here.